the way the questions are going here, I mean, like, let's not bet against Quentin Johnston.
After Jim Harbaugh said that, I decided to go back and watch every single snap that Quentin Johnston had, not only during the regular season, but the preseason as well. And I even went back and watched some clips that came out during training camp last year, so I could give you guys the full picture on Quentin Johnston and the full breakdown. Let's go. So Quentin Johnston actually started out last year looking pretty good in training camp, as he was constantly making plays down the field, one-handed catches in drills. He also did have some concentration drops, so it wasn't all good, but he did get off to a hot start. And going into the preseason, the Chargers, they really tried to get him going early with 2 targets on their first 3 plays. His first catch, it was a screen, didn't really go anywhere. He had no chance, but that second pass was indicative of how his season would go. He was explosive off the line of scrimmage, did not create any separation, and he needed to attack the ball better. Then the next series, we saw our first example of a missed opportunity to make a big play when he had his first dropped pass of his career. Let's get into the negatives of his game from last year that plagued him over the course of this entire season. First of all, and this is the biggest one, his route running. It left a lot to be desired, and he needs to be more precise with his footwork because he often plants with the wrong foot when breaking on routes, and he dances too much. He has a lot of false steps, and it never creates separation when he's doing little hezzies and dances like that. Most of the times, he rounds the edges of his routes instead of keeping them sharp, kind of like Keenan Allen would run up and boom, like that. Quentin Johnston's more of like this, like he's curving around. It's almost like he's in a roundabout driving a car. And then oftentimes when he would break on his route, it would be like right in the face of a defensive back who could immediately react to it, and it would basically like invite them to stay in his hip pocket and not allow him to create any sort of separation. I saw a lot of times where a DB was playing 10 yards off of him and they would ask him to run a 10-yard curl. Like that's basically setting him up for failure. And the coaches, they did him no favors in that regard. Now, Quentin Johnston was actually one of the worst wide receivers in the NFL last year at creating separation because of this, and he could improve his route running a lot just by breaking on his routes sooner before getting right in the defensive back's face. I mean, he was like within 2 yards of a DB sometimes when he's trying to break on a route. He also struggled against some physical cornerbacks, like specifically Patrick Surtain in that first Broncos game. He actually was doing pretty well in the second one. And then Sauce Gardner in the Jets game, he just locked him up. He would get jammed, and because he is a long strider and he has like build-up speed, it would just totally neutralize him, and he couldn't build up any speed. He was just simply stuck against Sauce Gardner. His short area quickness is like really, really bad. So bad that I actually had to look up what his 3-cone time was when he was coming out of college. And that basically tells you like a player's agility, and he graded in the bottom 17% of all wide receivers since 1987 in that drill. That translates to the field. And that lack of agility also hurts his breaks on routes, because then that means he can't really decelerate on those routes in order to cut effectively. And that is one big concern for him that I have long term. So it's vital for him to win those hand fights at the line of scrimmage with those physical cornerbacks, which he can do because I saw him do that on film, but he needs to do it consistently, or else he's just going to be taken out of the play completely because of that lack of agility. And then another big thing in his game that I noticed pretty quickly is that he puts his head down when running routes where he needs to make a cut in that route. Like whenever he puts his head down, it's a dead giveaway that he is not going deep. And as a DB, at that point, you know that you can fly downfield and break on whatever he's given you, because you know that he's not going to be running deep down the field. And also, he never did a single double move last season, so he's not going to be selling anything fake. You can break on that ball. And he did this most often when he was like running a curl route and a post over the middle. And at first, I didn't understand why he was doing this, because like typically guys, they put their head down when they're running really hard and they're trying to build up as much speed as possible in order to go like as deep as possible. Like they're running a deep 9, go deep. But he was doing the opposite. See, I think he does this because It's just kind of a bad habit that he fell into, and it probably developed because he knows that he's not really great at breaking on those routes, and I'm sure he's working on it. But this was just something that I noticed in his route running and in his game that, like, it's got to go completely, because it's a giveaway to any DB. Once he puts his head down, you can buy anything that he's selling. He's not going deep. He's going to break. Speaking of breaks, I can actually give you a pretty good break on Underdog Fantasy. If you click on the sign up link in the description and use my code McLean, that is MACLANE, then you will get up to $100 of your first deposit matched back to you. This is the best way to support me. I watched every single Quentin Johnston play. This video was a lot of work, so thank you so much if you use that code. And also, I really like Underdog Fantasy. In my opinion, they're the best fantasy sports app, so use that code if you want to. Thank you so much if you do. And now I want to talk about the other bad habits in Quentin Johnston's game, because the biggest narrative against Quentin Johnston right now is that he drops the ball. PFF only gave him 2 drops last year, and it felt like he had a lot more. And after going back and watching every single route that he ran and every target he had, I can say that it just felt like a lot more than it actually was. And yes, he did have some bad drops, like specifically the most egregious one was against the Packers, but he was just bad in the contested catch. And he had a lot of contested catch opportunities because he did not create separation for himself, like we already talked about. He had 22 contested catch targets, only caught 7 of them. So if you want to count those as like drops or missed opportunities, you know, obviously that drop rate would shoot up, but I don't think you can expect anyone to catch all of their contested catch targets. So I wouldn't really count those as drops. I do think it is fair, though, to criticize him for not creating separation often enough and creating those tough catch opportunities for himself. And then another reason the drops felt like a bigger issue is because he dropped balls where he was interfered with a lot. Like, I forgot how many penalties Quentin Johnston drew from defenders, but it was close to like a dozen, and he was targeted on almost every single penalty that he drew, and he dropped like 5 of those balls. So in terms of the drops, like, yeah, his hands could be better, obviously, because this is something that has plagued him even going back to his college days, where he had 8 drops on 78 targets his final year at TCU. But if he improves his route running, he'll create more separation and naturally catch the ball more because he'll have an easier time getting the ball. And now we can finally talk about the positives, because you must think that I probably hate Quentin Johnston. I don't. He actually has some sneaky good speed. He ran a 4.5, but he has long strides, and that speed, man, it builds up quick, and he got behind the defense a lot, like a lot more than you probably think. He also has some rare suddenness off the line of scrimmage sometimes, but I wanted to see more of that because it was like inconsistent off the snap. But when he had that suddenness, like it was a beautiful sight to see, and it looked really, really good. And when he shows that suddenness, it's hard for guys to keep up, and that is when he creates separation the most. He can swipe a guy's hands away from him and be open in a hurry when he wants to. And then another thing, like, I wanted to see him get more targets because he actually got open quite often, but was just like never targeted when he was open. He ran a lot of deep 9 routes, some posts, curls, deep corners, drag routes that are shallow over the middle. When you look at where he graded best, it was in the short middle of the field because of those shallow drags where he could catch the ball, create some yak for himself. The intermediate center of the field where he played well on those posts, and the deep right side where he would run those deep curl routes or those corners towards the sideline. He actually graded to be an elite receiver in those areas of the field, and it felt like he was just kind of set up to fail because he was targeted more often when he could not create separation or when he just flat out wasn't open. And he was open, and sometimes he was wide open. I even saw some easy touchdowns when he was open for a deep ball with a step on the defender and no safety over the top. Like, he wasn't targeted in those situations. And then also, there were plenty of routes that he ran that were designed to get other guys on this offense open. He would draw attention from defenses, so those were effective. And Jim Harbaugh wants to know, can he block? And let me tell you, yes, this dude can block, and he actually is a very willing blocker. He was probably the best blocking wide receiver on this team last year. So overall, I think his rookie season, it's being overblown because he did not get open a lot. He obviously lacked the skills of route running finesse in order to create separation. but he never really had the opportunity to make a play when he did get open, and he did get open quite a bit. And on top of that, sometimes they would force the ball to him when he wasn't open, so it made it look like he could never get open. He was pretty good after the catch, wasted no time getting up the field. I wish that he had more opportunities to get into open space, because when he would get the ball, he was pretty often draped by a defender and he just could not break free from the first guy. I thought his route running got better later on in the season as well, and he got more snaps in the red zone after Mike Williams went down. But then later on in the season, they started to give him more snaps and targets, probably because they also noticed in practice and on film that he was improving as a route runner. He even added that little like Keenan Allen hezzy like half skip move that he does. I saw him do that one time on film. I think it was against Green Bay, and it worked. He just didn't get targeted. And I'm looking at PFF right now. Quentin Johnston actually was the highest graded run blocker on our team for all wide receivers, if you don't include Mike Williams, who only played 3 games. So the biggest thing I think he needs to improve on is that route running. He was working with Marvin Harrison Jr. this offseason. You can see side-by-side comparison. Quentin Johnston looks pretty good. You can see he's got some sneaky speed. Just needs to get some better agility, I think, some better route running, get some more secure hands, and be able to create separation for yourself so you're not always in a tough catch scenario. And also, when he's open, just throw him the ball. And if you did not see my video yesterday, the Chargers have a new wide receiver on this team. His name is DJ Chark. DJ Chark.